Okay, now that we've touched on part one of this video, we've talked about devices, company or personal, what kind of variables do we need to account for. I told you next we need to talk about the networks we're working from. You're not at the local office network, the LAN. You're not protected by a full-on robust firewall. Many things that can be done from the domain controller. Different things we have to account for when we're working from these three, I'd say, family categories of mobile networks: public and guest networks, your own personal home network, and then 4G turning it into mobile hotspots. There's going to be two principal questions we'll need to ask ourselves and two variables we'll have to account for when we're looking at the security risks associated with these kinds of networks. Number one, is it encrypted? That's question number one. And question number two, is it password protected? So firstly, let's look at public and guest networks. Many of us do it. You're at your local coffee shop, you're at a hotel on a business trip. A lot of different scenarios in which we would use public and guest Wi-Fi, public and guest networks. There are certain variables we need to take into account, and it's number one and number two. Is it encrypted? Is it password protected? One, for encryption, I would say we don't know, but in general, no. When in doubt, you're going to assume that it's not encrypted. And by the way, even if you go to ask whoever was working there, for example, you go ask the person at the help desk at the hotel, you go ask the barista at the coffee shop. If you ask them, is your Wi-Fi encrypted? You think they're going to know the answer to that? Very few people within the organization that's providing you this free Wi-Fi, they're most likely not going to know. So in general, assume that you're working on an unencrypted network. Adjust your work accordingly in what you're doing and how careful you are. As far as what encryption is and is there a certain vulnerability to working on an unencrypted network, in general, it means there's a higher likelihood that your traffic could be intercepted, that what you're doing could be snooped upon. It's a security risk, and that's something we need to adjust for. A lot of modern OSs, such as even Windows, has some things to help with that, has some device level firewall capabilities, but in general, we want to work on encrypted networks rather than unencrypted networks, and that's what your local office can provide that oftentimes your public guest Wi-Fi's cannot. In terms of password enforcement, I would say be picky. I know it's a little bit less convenient, right? But in general, you don't need to be working on guest Wi-Fi that isn't password protected. There are exceptions to the rule in which a company has a really good guest Wi-Fi setup in which it's encrypted, and they bifurcate their company network from their public network, and they have it encrypted, but they want to make it open so people don't have to go get the password. Exceptions to every rule, but once again, be picky. Try to work with, if you're going to work at a guest Wi-Fi, try to make sure that it's at least password enforced. And just as a bonus, verify that the guest Wi-Fi you're getting onto is actually the official guest Wi-Fi. There's a lot of spoof networks that you'll see as available networks, and it turns out you're getting onto a malicious network. So that's public and guest Wi-Fi. In terms of home network, you're pretty much dealing with the same thing. In terms of, is it encrypted? Probably not. Okay. Something you might be able to address, there might be a way to take that modem, or if you have a dedicated third-party firewall or gateway at your house, there might be a way you can encrypt the network in general. Once again, assume you're not working on an encrypted network and adjust how careful you are accordingly. Number two, is your home network and password protected? It better be. And I don't mean with that little serial code that came on the side of the box when you got the modem in the first place, okay? Y'all know better than that. Make sure you have a strong, secure password for your home network. You could reference our video on password best practices. Just don't use a company password for your home network password. And in general, if you really want to, there's a way you could even hide your network to where it's not shown by any kind of Wi-Fi scanners as an available network. Another thing to take into account when you're working at your home as opposed to a public or guest network, whereas you don't have as much traffic constantly hitting that network because it's a private, personal home network. What are your family members doing? It goes back to best practices in terms of internet and downloads and et cetera, et cetera. What happens if perhaps you're a parent and you've got children who are downloading anything from anywhere in every way? That's going to be another way that this network becomes a compromised network. So in general, be careful with that. Keep that in mind with home networks. Then we get into the mobile hotspot set up by 4G. If you're just working, for example, on company instant messaging and email from your phone, perhaps even a mobile version of a cloud-based application. I do that on my phone, my own personal device, because other people won't be getting onto your network. A lot of these variables don't have to be accounted for in terms of network. But just so you know, when you go to set up your phone or tablet as a mobile hotspot, is it encrypted? Once again, probably not. Okay. And is it password enforced? It better be. If you have the ability to set up a guest mobile hotspot, first of all, you most likely probably don't want to use it for other people. In that case, it should not be shown as an available network. But if for whatever reason you want other people to be able to get onto that mobile hotspot, set up a password, it's just good practice. In general, there's a way that we can help out with these two risks, regardless of whether we're at the coffee shop or at our house or whether we're setting up a mobile hotspot, is we can set up a VPN. Okay. What is a VPN, by the way? Give you all a chance to answer it in your head. No points given, by the way. Setting up a VPN really helps with this. A virtual private network in general, most likely is going to be a communication between a client-based application on your device and something most likely provided by the company local office firewall. There's a private tunnel created, a virtual private network, and gives you password protected, encrypted tunnel and dedicated channel to your local network. This is especially helpful when you're accessing local assets from the office, such as a locally hosted server and application or local file shares and storage. So a VPN helps adjust for a lot of these issues, and is quite easy, to be honest, to set up. You can work with your IT services provider. A lot of times the equipment and infrastructure you've already invested in have the ability to set up VPN and just go, evaluate which of your employees from which devices work remotely on any kind of frequency and set up a VPN tunnel. It's just quite easy to do in many cases, and it helps you to adjust for these risks we see at guest Wi-Fi and home and mobile hotspots. So with that being said, let's wrap it up in the next part of this video, the last part of this video, into knowing that we have some risks we have to take into account from the devices we're working on to the networks we're working from. How does that affect, if at all, what we do in terms of data access and systems access?